Welcome back. In this video I'll be talking about the curriculum documents for this academic year and how they differ to some extent from last year's. So what has changed this year? 5 for the price of 4. We've added a course objective. Those of you who were with us last year will know we had 4 course objectives for each level. Speaking and listening skills were combined into one objective. Not anymore. Decision was made to separate speaking and listening, and the reasons for this: we can organise the SLOs more easily if we have the 4 macro skills, speaking, listening, reading and writing, listed as separate objectives. So now the SLOs, the second point here, SLOs last year, some of them actually, one SLO contained 2 skills. It might be something like speaking and writing embedded in the same SLO. Now the problem with that is it creates problems for assessment. It's very difficult to measure. So of course language and communication, the way language is used is it's used in an integrated way, and it is an integrated skills course. But so we're not saying that when you are teaching a particular lesson and there's a speaking SLO, we're not saying that or there's a writing SLO, you're not saying that the students have to be silent for the whole lesson, of course. No, they're going to be speaking as well. They're going to be reading model texts and getting exposure to some of the features of that particular genre of text. But the point is that there's a primary focus of a particular lesson. There's usually a main aim for a lesson plan, and then there are subsidiary aims that support that. So the SLOs really deal with the primary focus of a particular lesson. Is it speaking? Is it listening? Is it reading? Is it writing? So the other thing is that by doing this, we now have it's easier to ensure a greater balance between the 4 skills. I showed an example in a previous video of the course objectives as they look now. I'm just going to show that again. The ones in blue are the new ones. The course objectives for reading, writing, use of English are the same as last year. Speaking and listening have been split. The second major change this year is the streamlining of SLOs. What do I mean by streamlining? I mentioned earlier there are now fewer SLOs than there were last year. Last year we had about 50 per level. Now we have between 33 and 40 per level, depending on the level. As I mentioned earlier when I showed the pacing guide, some SLOs are repeated several times in the module. I should say that there are fewer receptive skills SLOs than productive. However, word of caution, this does not mean less focus on receptive skills. Absolutely not. What it means is that the receptive skills SLOs are quite generic. They don't refer to a specific text on a specific topic, for example. They refer to listening or reading skills when dealing with a range of texts on a range of topics. The skill itself and the kind of listening or reading that the learners are doing, that is what is reflected in the SLO. These SLOs are repeated numerous times throughout the module. and it's very important that the learners receive sustained practice in reading and listening, but also that they receive instruction, training in how to listen effectively, how to read effectively, how to listen for stressed words in a sentence, for example, not worry about understanding every word, raising awareness of chunking and features of connected speech, for example, things like this. Or there needs to be sustained training and practice. So just because there are, for example, 4 listening SLOs at a level, and there may be 15 speaking SLOs, this does not mean that you should be spending much more time, 4 times more time working on their speaking skills compared to their listening skills. No, you need to be balancing things. In the curriculum evaluation last year, actually, a number of students, respondents to the surveys and student participants in the focus groups, said that they were not receiving enough practice in or training in listening skills. So please do not neglect the receptive skills just because there are fewer SLOs. Okay, the other major change is that in last year's curriculum, a number of the SLOs were expressed in purely linguistic terms, in terms of linguistic knowledge, not in terms of communication, not in terms of language function, not in terms of real-world language use. So I'm going to show you an example of this. Last year we had this SLO in our level 103 course. Can understand and appropriately use the past simple and past continuous tenses. Why? Use them? What for? To pass a test? To show off to all their classmates, look, I can write sentences with the past continuous. There's no communicative outcome there. There's no purpose to using this language. There's no context provided. Obviously there's the context provided in the course book, but these SLOs have been, where possible, transformed into communicative SLOs. The example here, last year it was this, now we can reasonably fluently relate a straightforward narrative or description as a linear sequence of events. So this explains what the learners are able to do with the language. They're able to talk about something in the past, a narrative, a story, for example, an anecdote, and organize it using transitional phrases like firstly, after that, using time expressions, time clauses, and using narrative tenses. So they're able to, this is expressed in terms of a communicative outcome, but it doesn't show what language they need to use. So, how do I know as a teacher what language to cover if I have an SLO like that? You can use your professional judgment, first of all, and your experience. But also, as I mentioned before, the pacing guide shows the specific coursebook page numbers to be covered. Consult the student's book. Look at those pages. What language is presented? What language do the learners need to use to complete the practice activities? Also, we included, as I mentioned before, and I'll just skip back to it, the pacing guide contains this. Key language points to be covered, and they are listed for your reference. So if you just use the pacing guide and the student's book when you're planning, this will help you to determine what language the learners need in order to be able to achieve this learning outcome. Now I should say that these lists of key language points to be covered really is key. It doesn't cover everything. We started producing a list of linguistic prerequisites for the achievement of each SLO. This is a huge amount of work which we weren't able to finish in the summer because we had a very small team working on this. We've produced it for 101 and it is available if anybody wants, on request, if anybody wants to consult it. It's a 54-page document, so I stress if anybody wants to consult it. If you're having trouble sleeping, it might be a cure for your insomnia. But it is actually very detailed, and it includes information not only about grammatical structure and lexis, it includes information about pronunciation. It also includes, it's also included for the receptive skills. It includes information about specific sub-skills that learners need to acquire to be able to achieve the SLO. And it also includes specific vocabulary that and grammatical structures that learners need to understand in the texts in the course book. So it is incredibly detailed. We haven't done it for the other 3 levels. Work on that will be ongoing throughout this academic year. It's going to take us some time to get this finished, but it's a huge project. But there is the level 101 to refer to. So why did we change these SLOs? First reason is with an eye on the future, really. The pacing guide that I showed you earlier has coursebook page reference numbers. It refers very, very closely to the coursebook. The curriculum seems to be very, very book bound at the moment. Now, that's the situation at the moment, but we are trying to move away from that. Now, we would like to see more communicative learning outcomes because it allows for greater flexibility. There is a chance in the future that we may decide to change our coursebook. And if that decision is taken, we can't rewrite the curriculum from scratch. That's just not practical. So we want the SLOs to be more standalone, not tied rigidly to one particular coursebook. Having more communicative SLOs allows us to do that. I should say as well that the SLOs were developed with a very, very close reference to the descriptors in the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. So we are trying to, curriculum development is ongoing, and the curriculum this year is probably, the curriculum next academic year is probably not going to look exactly the same as it does this year. There will be some changes. It's an ongoing process, and so we feel that tying ourselves to one set of materials that have been produced for a very generic or worldwide audience is not the way to go. I mean, no course book is written for our learners. It's written for a faceless body of language learners from a huge variety of contexts and backgrounds all around the world. So all course books have their pros and cons. They have things that are more relevant to our needs and things that are less relevant to our needs, both in terms of content, in terms of instructional materials, in terms of approach, and all of this means that you know, we are in the context we are in a better position to judge what our learners need, because we see them every day in class, because we communicate with them, because we know them, and people at Oxford University Press or Cambridge University Press or Pearson's or Macmillan's, sitting in an office in another city or in another country, don't know our learners as well as we do. So more communicative SLOs will allow us to gradually move away from depending so heavily, so exclusively on a course book. That's not to say we're going to throw the course books out of the window. Scott Thornbury might like that idea, and but the point is we are an institution, and we do need, there are concerns about standardisation, etc., 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 and many students appreciate the structure that a course book provides. It provides a sense of progress, progression, etc., etc. So we're not saying that. We are saying that it would be really nice to have more scope for building up a bank of alternative materials developed in-house that more closely meet the needs of the learners in our context. And as I said, there is a chance we could change the course book in the future as well after trialling. So this is a movement in that direction. The other main reason for this, I've touched on a couple of times already, is that fewer SLOs allows for repetition of SLOs, allows for recycling, consolidation, practice of something that they have encountered earlier in the course. And this should lead to more effective learning, more successful learning, more effective teaching. The other thing is, it's an attempt to address an issue that has been raised in the last 2 years in the curriculum evaluation, that we have a lot of content to cover in a 7-week period. We've done what we can with this. Many instructors have asked that the programme be extended to a 2-year programme. All of these concerns, these suggestions have been listened to, but there are certain things that are out of our hands. This cannot be done because of this would be a university level decision. We have one academic year for the foundation year. This is what we have. We are required to get our learners to a B1 level of proficiency by the end of the year. We are trying to make changes and improvements that we can make within our context and within the constraints that exist. And this is an attempt to do this. Fewer SLOs, at least, should alleviate to some extent this issue. So, how does all this look in the revised pacing guides? I have already mentioned this in the earlier video, so if you go back to the first video, look at me guiding you through the pacing guide, you'll see how the streamlined SLOs now fit in to the pacing guides. If you have any questions, again, I'd like to reiterate, please don't hesitate to contact your coordinators in the first instance, and if you have any further questions, I mean, of course, anytime feel free to contact us as well in the curriculum unit. Room 207, Building 30, and the email address I'll put up at the end. Thank you. That brings us to the end of this video. The next section will look at continuous assessment. Thank you. Bye.